Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers. More Black Sabbath content this time. Been much in the news of recent times, and sadly, not always for cheerful reasons. However, about a month ago, I published a video expressing some skepticism about the upcoming re-release of The Eternal Idol, once again in remastered form. If you haven't seen that, perhaps you would care to take a look before proceeding with this. However, the gist of what I said, and I did receive some pushback. I know, the effrontery. The main focus of which was, apart from my unwarranted negativity, and that I was under no compulsion to buy it. I was so glad to be informed of this. I was losing sleep over that. But the main thrust of the arguments were that the album had been out of print, it was a chance for newer fans to buy it. A statement which is patently false. Now, as it is germane to what I'm about to say, I will just take a few moments and go through the history of this, just to remove all doubt. The album was released November 1987, when I purchased it in vinyl form. 1996, I don't know if it was actually in its original pressing, released on CD. I don't remember that. But however, not the point. It was released in 1996 on the Castle Communications label as part of the Black Sabbath remaster series, which covered everything from the debut up until including the Eternal Idol. It was then re-released again in 2004 on Sanctuary Records, which, according to my research, I did not avail myself of this purchase. But according to my research, which is fundamentally looking this up on Discogs, this was also a remaster. Then, as we all know, in 2010, Sanctuary Records again re-released it, again a remaster. This time in a double CD, deluxe edition, the second CD being the Ray Gillen demo versions of The Eternal Idol. Now, while I trust the information on Discogs, I am not able to say for each of these iterative remasters what they were remastered from. Or, for that matter, exactly, because I'm not a sound engineer, what the process actually entailed. I remain skeptical on some of them. It's the old saying, isn't it? You open a Word document. You don't do anything and you go to close it, and it asks you to save the changes. Anyway. But the point is, from the day of its release up until the present day, the album has never, ever been out of print. And it's also been widely available. So, that aspect of any criticism aimed at me, I'm afraid, just doesn't hold any water. The album has always been available, which does obviously set it apart from the other Tony Martin era albums, but that has been discussed by me and many others. I have a couple of videos on the channel dedicated to the Tony Martin era box set. Don't need to repeat all that story again. And here we are in 2025 with yet another remaster. Again, I am uncertain as to from what it was remastered, which does open a little question, at least to my mind. Again, based on the information on my original pressings and what's said on Discogs, etc., there seems to be a slight discrepancy here. The original pressing credits list it as a digital recording, whereas the claim for this 2025 remaster is that it was remastered from the original analog tapes. I can throw no light on that. In terms of content, well, we already knew this, and I said in the last video, it was the album as written plus the 2 bonus tracks, which is exactly the same as the 2010 release, namely Some Kind of Woman and an early version of Black Moon. So there's no new material whatsoever. I did say on the previous video that I would wait for some other reviewer to buy it before making any decisions, but well, you know how these things go. I took the plunge. So what exactly did we get? Well, again, in my prediction, I predicted that there would no doubtless be a booklet with some essay informing us of nothing we didn't already know, some photographs, etc., etc. Well, I was certainly wrong on that score, wasn't I? Very minimal packaging. The CD booklet, I don't have the vinyl, so I can't compare, but I can't imagine it being fundamentally different. But it's a simple booklet containing the lyrics and the credits. Now, I have to say, the original production, even going back to the vinyl, of this album, I always thought was rather good, and over the years has held up rather well, I think. Not something you can always say of 80s productions. But this certainly, in terms of production, was vastly superior to the 2 albums that followed it, Headless Cross and Tear, whose productions sounded awful and dated the day they were released. I did also go on to say that this release would probably be, well, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference listening to it between this and, shall we say, the 2010 remaster, which I have to admit is not quite true. This sounds a little fuller, a little warmer. I think the bass frequencies have been enhanced generally, and the bass itself is, when doing the back-to-back comparison, is distinctly, subtly, but distinctly more audible, which I have to say I like. Particular example to illustrate the point would be the acoustic opening to The Shining. You can distinctly hear bass notes being played on the new remaster, which you either can't hear on the previous remaster, or they're very faint. Now, when I'm listening to these things, I rip them onto my computer. I have a decent set of, they're old. I have Logitech speakers with subwoofer and all that. They're old, but they're no expensive in the day, decent quality in the day. And I have no problem, for example, when comparing the other Black Sabbath remasters or remixes, Technical Ecstasy or Forbidden. The difference is night and day apparent. So it's not as though I'm listening to this on an iPhone. Again, some people may have far superior stereo equipment or whatever, I don't know. And I'll have to allow for the fact, at least, that way may well make a difference. But I can only report on what I have. Now, another user comment to my last video opened up a very interesting point. It's something I had absolutely not considered. And basically the question would be, okay, it's been remastered, but remastered for what in 2025? And the commentator made the reference of something along the lines, it had been, the new one sounds good, but has been remastered for iPhone ear, whatever you call them. Earbuds, whatever, you know what I mean. It's something I've never considered, especially in the Spotify age, where a lot of content is consumed on devices perhaps not ideal for listening to audio, such as phones. There may well be a specific remastering or something that's done for that. I've heard nothing about it. I don't know if it was pure speculation or whatever, but it just struck me as an interesting point. And it's a question that had never occurred to me to ask, remastered for what? In a technical sense. Presumably most things are released on the assumption that most people are going to be listening to them on fairly ordinary, standard stereo equipment back in the day. and it's balanced for that. Not everybody is going to have a 25,000 euro Bang & Olufsen sound system at home, and never did have. But it's an interesting point. If these modern remasters are remastered for something and sound different in other delivery mediums, I don't know. Interesting. Anybody knows more about that, please feel free to inform me or enlighten me. Having said that, this release is obviously no part of any previous Black Sabbath Deluxe, Super Deluxe box set or whatever editions. The meager packaging, etc., sets it apart from that. But apart from the slides, I said, yes, okay, I admit it constitutes a minor improvement. Sounds a little different. Could they have made this release any better? Understand under better, more value, better value for money. I think they could. Yeah, I think they could have. I've said when reviewing other Black Sabbath releases, remasters, etc. And I think both Technical and Ecstasy and Forbidden proved the point, where the remix made all the difference in the world. Having said that, The Eternal Idol, for me, was never an album crying out for a remix. It really didn't need it. There was nothing wrong at all with the original production or the production of the 2010 remaster, which was the last one I purchased. It's not Born Again, where it's had a very divisive production, or Forbidden even. I don't really believe in remixing something just because you can. But again, it didn't happen. Whether it would have made any difference or not, I don't know. I'm not bemoaning the fact that it didn't. Yeah, but yet, even without going down the box set route, there could have been things done to this. I don't think you probably. I don't think that from a business point of view, this would have justified a box set. Well, whatever you or I may think of the album, but they could have made a double disc set as they did in 2010, perhaps even a triple disc set. Plenty of good live recordings out there from this tour. Maybe not professional, but there are some bootlegs out there that sound pretty good. Bremen springs to mind, and there's one or two from Italy. Also, very enjoyable listens, not only from performance, but from quality. And obviously being, this has historical interest at a very short tour, under very strained and controversial circumstances. Speaking of which, I'm almost certain, although the memory does deceive, doesn't it, that some of those shows they played in South Africa were recorded. Radio broadcast, perhaps, or perhaps just the in-house management or whatever at Sun City recorded them. Probably recorded every band that played there. It's certainly not unheard of, is it? Again, it's a long time ago, but I do seem to remember something along those lines that was recorded for radio. They certainly wouldn't have played it on the South African radio I was, or my parents were listening to, but never mind. Yeah. On the other hand, there are other things out there, as we know. One only has to go onto YouTube, and you can hear a fledgling version of The Shining, called No Way Out, I believe, with Jeff Fenholt singing, which proves, if nothing else, we certainly missed out on nothing when his career with the band never took off. And terrible, cheesy lyrics. Oh, God, yes. The version of the song, although instrumentally very similar, but the version that we know is vastly superior. We also know that can't happen because that would be classified as new material, and new material by Black Sabbath is not allowed, contractually prohibited from being released. Won't go into the rest of that. Well, ultimately, yes, I wasn't I was slightly wrong. Yes, you can hear differences. And I do like them. I really do. But this is hardly a new or revelatory listening experience. This is not listening to the Technical Complexity Forbidden remix, obviously. Okay, they're remixes. This is a remaster. I get that. A better comparison would be this is not the same as listening to last year's Headless Cross and Tear remasters and comparing them because you only had the original pressings with which to compare them, or to which to compare them. And that was a night and day difference as well. This is not the same. I haven't gone back to the original because I don't have the vinyl available, and even if I did, I have nothing on which to play it. And also, obviously, comparing CD to vinyl is perhaps slightly unfair. But that would be the, it would be the only way to see if it has, what the fundamental difference was. Because when you keep getting these incremental remasters, with incremental improvements here, tweaks there or something, yeah, it becomes much harder to discern the changes, I find. And certainly, apart from what I highlighted here, the sound is a little warmer, is a little fuller. Bass frequencies, yes, up a bit, and you can hear the bass more distinctly. But these are very nuanced. You can hear them, but it doesn't change either the listening experience or your perception of the album. Not in my opinion. If you don't have the Eternal Idol, then go forth and chastise yourself, for you should have it. By all means, buy this. It sounds damn fine. It really does. But if you're the fool, the collector, the fanatic, you'll probably buy it anyway. If for no other reason than at least it's performing royalties for Tony Martin. Since most of his work had been out of with the band had been out of print for so long, he deserves that, if nothing else. And it may well become my go-to version of the Eternal Idol. And time will tell. But on the last video, I said I will once I'd reviewed it, I would come back, and here I am. And I did say if I was wrong, I'd be prepared to eat my words, but I will not be eating my words. I acknowledge what I've acknowledged, and I do like it, but no, it's too nuanced, it's too subtle. There's no fundamental difference with this. Again, I'm perhaps unfair comparing a remix to a remaster, but I would never, for the rest of my life, go back to the original pressing of Forbidden. Just won't do it. Some other remasters have been pretty good, especially from other bands. Yes, okay, the most recent one, I won't go back to the original pressing, but this just doesn't offer enough for me. And I've also said in the past that I absolutely refused, I will never buy another remastered album again. Well, there you go. There's willpower for you. Ultimately, curiosity got the better of me. I don't regret it. It's nice, but it is not an essential release. It is not an essential release. And had I actually been able to listen to it 3 or 4 times in quiet, absorb it, there's a very good chance I wouldn't have bought it. Simply. It's as simple as that. The differences between this and what came before it are simply too nuanced, too subtle to make any fundamental difference. As I said before, this is not a revelatory listening experience. It's nice. Is it 20 euros worth of nice? That's 5 beers in the local bar. I don't know. Again, I've bought it. That's that. Don't particularly regret it, but there's a reasonable chance that had I been able to listen to it, I wouldn't have bought it. So there you go. I'm not going to eat my words for anybody who was waiting for me to do so. I'm sorry. I will have to disappoint you. On that note, any other thoughts? Anybody hear it differently? Anybody got a better insight into this remastering process? Exactly what was happened? The original analog tapes, is that a misprint? Have I missed something? Interesting to hear. Does this sound fundamentally different on high-end equipment? Or is it remastered for earpods? I don't know. Like I said, anybody has any insights, I would be happy to hear them. But on that note, I thank you for your indulgence. Feel free to comment, to subscribe, to like, to share. And until next time, be well and Maçhonquèrre.